Hi, everybody. We're the Skeleton Crew, and today we're going to give you our initial reactions to Prehistoric Planet Season 2, Episode 1. We're going to release a video like this for every episode in the show. We're very excited about it. I think, not to speak for all of us here, but I really like this episode in general, and I think a lot of what I didn't love about Season 1 is kind of rectified here. Before we tell you anything that we think about this show, you should find out that I'm Dr. James Napoli, a postdoctoral researcher at North Carolina State University and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences.
My name is Amelia Zietlow. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History.
I'm Alexander Rubenstahl, PhD candidate at Yale University, shooting in better light today.
I'm Dalton Meyer, king of the white balance. I am also a PhD student at Yale University. And I feel obliged, before we say what we are together, I feel obliged because we've been forgetting to a little bit at the start of our videos, like good YouTubers should, to say, if you like this video, please hit that like button and please hit the subscribe button with the bell to notify you when more videos like this come out every day this week.
Our apartment looks like...
Yeah, it really does. Because together...
We're the Skeleton Crew, and we're not the cleaning crew.
I think that white light was doing us favors. Now it's like dark and just looks kind of sad.
It looks better when you can't see it, though.
Imagine I'm in the formless void that Amelia was in a few weeks ago. That formless void, of course, being Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
It truly is a wretched place. Okay, so
yeah.
What do people think?
Well, yeah, so I mean, overall impressions, I don't want to speak first on this because I gave the intro, but generally, how are you guys feeling after episode 1?
So I watched the entirety of season 1 yesterday just to refresh because I watched it when it came out and then haven't looked at it again since. And I felt like this episode was just a lot more enjoyable than the entirety of season 1 was for me because it felt like more things were happening, more exciting things were happening. It was a bit quicker paced and I liked that a lot rather than like, look, there's dinosaurs walking on a beach again.
Walking with dinosaurs. Dalton.
Yeah, sure. I can go. I to confess, I still have yet to see all of season 1, but I have watched like the first 3 episodes now, I think, of season 1. Which I am enjoying, but I also enjoyed this more than what I have seen from season 1 so far. And I think part of that is, and as we'll talk about each individual segment, but the two kind of Madagascar segments, which are really cohesive with one another, fit really well and kind of make the core of this episode. And it makes it feel, and I really hate to do this because I feel like this show should be judged in its own right. It's not fair to consistently compare it to Walking with Dinosaurs, but I'm going to do so anyway. This episode felt more like Walking with Dinosaurs. It felt more like it had a narrative. And the one thing, Alex and I discussed this a lot last night after we watched the episode, is like, to improve this episode, this was good, but I feel like if this had just been a Madagascar episode, there actually could have really been something with like 3 protagonist species of like the Simosuchus, the Adalatherium, and the blind Majungasaurus, which is a great concept of like a protagonist animal is this like old one-eyed craggly ass theropod. Like those Madagascar sequences are so good, and they have such kind of an innate naturalistic storytelling to them of following these animals as they're doing their things. It was really great. And then it was a bit jarring for me to go straight from that to then an Antarctic segment that kind of felt a bit out of place. So I think this was a very good episode. I liked it a lot. There are some things I would like to have changed, or if I should say not like to have changed. If I was in charge, I would have done it a little differently. But I think it's very good.
Fair.
Alex.
I also, like Dalton, have only seen some of season 1. I think just the first 2 episodes now. But I did like this more than what I've seen in season 1, and I liked what I've seen in season 1. Much like Dalton, I feel like this would have been a better episode if it was just Madagascar, the episode. Like, from the stuff I've seen, I love the focus on, like, you have a lovely diversity. You have ancient, like, stem crocs and weird lepidosaurs and dinosaurs and a mammal. So like a great bit of diversity, which was something I was hoping for this season from what I knew from previous seasons, and what I had seen. Yeah, the Madagascar location kind of feels very realized in a way that a lot of the other environments haven't, where it's like, here's a dinosaur in a swamp. Look at it go. And this is like, here's Madagascar. Everything's digging holes. There are problems with these holes. Things are trying to get into holes. Things are hiding in holes. Yeah, a fun every time we were in Madagascar, I was locked in. In terms of the episode overall, I mean, everything looks great. The pterosaurs War of the Worlds tripod part was pretty cool. We'll talk about that in a bit. Because this is a piece of media, I am going to now air some media opinions that are mine. But this is a piece of media, so it is okay to make judgments based on, it as a piece of media, which is that I think, and again, I don't really want to contrast this too much with Walking with Dinosaurs because Dalton is right. It is its own thing. I've seen people describe it as kind of Planet Earth, but with dinosaurs. But I find the kind of pacing and kind of just behavior a little repetitive. It's okay, and when it's good, it's good. But Planet Earth can get away with doing like pacing like that, and other nature documentaries can do that because they're real and they're shooting a real cool thing that you can actually see in the world, and it's again gorgeous. And this is kind of an abstraction where it's prehistoric planet. It's like we have these gorgeous designs, as accurate as we can make them. Here's behavior that other animals have done in documentaries. Behavior, and that I find a little less engaging than maybe a slightly more fanciful narrative. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I'll even go a little bit further, which is to say, I didn't even like Planet Earth that much. I never even was able. Yeah, I know. I couldn't make it through Planet Earth season 2. I gave up halfway through because I
stopped at the deep sea part.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good narrative. And I find that animal documentaries, or really any sort of media I consume, whether it's informational, documentary, any sort of work of fiction, I prefer narratives. I think that they're more engaging. And I agree that I think the standout of this episode was Madagascar, right? And it was like really, really engaging. I loved it. Like rapt attention. And I have sometimes fairly severe ADHD and often need to be playing video games while I watch TV to not lose interest.
Can you do Subway Surfers video?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm the target audience for that.
He hasn't turned the sound off.
So what I'm saying is that the fact that I was able to not really do anything but watch that segment and be completely happy, I think is a testament to how engaging it was. I also think Antarctica was probably my least favorite. We'll get into why in a little bit. There's one thing I thought they were going to do, though, that they didn't, and I think it's kind of disappointing, which is that at the end, I thought that the Hatzegopteryx... Hatzegopteryx. Our pronunciation has been corrected. We looked it up. Scott was right. I was wrong. I know. The Hatzegopteryx that's doing the mating display with the dead Tethyshadros, I thought was going to be one of the member of the Hatzegopteryx death squad that we saw at the beginning of the episode. And I thought they were going to tie it back that, yes, you have this scene where there are these terrifying hunters that are terrorizing a family, and then you kind of flip it a little bit and have it that, this is part of the reproductive behavior. He's trying to attract a mate. This is how the species propagates. It's a little hackneyed, but I think that for a lot of members of the public, there is often still a tendency to make carnivorous animals the villains or enemies. And I like anything that really shows them as, their species themselves. They do all of the behaviors that they need to for their life cycle. That involves killing other animals. Doesn't make them bad. Here it is as part of something very beautiful, and that was very, very well done. Almost affecting in a kind of way to watch them do their mating dance with each other. It would be a cool inversion to have that from the beginning of the episode, but
well,
they didn't do that.
If you're in the writing room at Prehistoric Planet, there's like a quota that the producers have, which is, have you killed several infants this episode? And it's hard to make animals that murder babies, not the villains of your episode.
Right.
So I was distracted by I was distracted by the demon that lives in my apartment. Is the one that the pterosaur that I thought the pterosaur that brought the baby was one of the ones in the death squad, or was I just making that connection on my own, or is that what you're saying?
It's the same species. I thought they were going to explicitly say this is the same individual. Like this is the
right,
same
they don't
hunt.
say it. Okay.
Right.
The
Okay,
carcass
that
is
is-
a Zalmoxes, right?
No, the carcass
it's
is
a
Tethyshadros.
Oh, and it's just
It's
So
just
like
another-
I connected those
Okay.
dots on my own, but you're right that if they had said that, it would have
Well,
made it better and like or just fleshed it out more. And I think like the thing that this one episode did better than anything in the first season was develop the characters. Like I know they're not characters, but I think that is why it was so much more engaging and why Madagascar worked. But also like why the pterosaur segment worked, even though it was broken up into two halves. Because it was like one continuous story that was kind of you traveled through the environments following the one animal. In Madagascar, like you're kind of following a thread here. Like I think yeah.
Madagascar almost felt to me kind of like a long Stephen King novel, where it's kind of more about the town, and you just meander between characters as different things happen. Like these are, I think, I would argue, the good parts of the book. There's one part of the book that I think should probably have been cut out of the book.
yes.
If you know, you know. In fact, that's not an I think. It should have been. But I think the interesting parts of a lot of those books are just kind of when you're just wandering and you're kind of just getting to know a setting. And I like that aspect of Madagascar, that you have little self-contained narratives interspersed, but you kind of just get a very good sense of place. I really like that.
It's the establishing of the country. In King's case, it's the Lovecraft country. It's his fictional New England town. Shadow over Innsmouth, the first third of the book of the novella is just I walked around this old town and this is what the buildings look like. And there were these weird people. There's a grocery store and I bought crackers. He bought Cheez-Its. Cheese crackers, which were Cheez-Its, which existed at the time, which had just been made. Anyway, this is off tangent. But yes, setting up where you are is important.
Yeah. So if I was to direct the story of the Madagascar episode of just a full one, it would be like you follow the old one-eyed Majungasaurus, and because it's a big animal, it has like a larger territory and it wanders around. And as you're following its exploits of like trying to eat and survive as an injured and aging animal, you meet the Simosuchus and you meet the Adalatherium and you meet like all the people that it runs into. And then I know we're going to go back to Madagascar later in the season with the Beelzebufo and the Repetosaurus. And it's like, just put those in this episode and just have this be like a tour. And we follow our tour guide, who is this old elderly curmudgeon who's been around the block a few times. And you see all of their cool neighbors.
Right.
I have a hot take. The whole series should have just been about Madagascar. Now that we think about it, it's like they could have done it by season and just really focused on a place and developed it. Because I realized this a little bit earlier. We were talking about how narrative is important, how it almost, to me, something I kind of realized is that it doesn't feel real. Like I know that's what they're going for. They're going for a documentary. But the way a documentary only works because we understand what zebras are and we understand what Africa is, and it's familiar to us. Even if you haven't been there, you understand it and you get it. Versus, like, for me, I'm sorry, animal, knock it off. What are you doing?
See, folks, this is where we're establishing the setting of Amelia's apartment.
Right, the terrible beast that lives within it.
This will be important later in the narrative.
We've entered Wild Hour, where she wanders my apartment and scratches things. Right now, she was scratching at my doormat. Earlier, it was my couch. Anyways, back to the point. So, it's like nature documentaries that are focused on living animals work because we understand what they are. Even if it's an animal you've never seen before, you can make sense of it. Extinct things, I don't think we have any sense of like what a sauropod actually looked like or how it actually was like to be around. And like I understand that like in season 1 at least, the reason they didn't animate sauropods in environments with anything in them is because they were having trouble animating them interacting with like real environments. And it's like that's fair, but also like watching the Dreadnoughtus sequence again yesterday, I was like, this just doesn't look real to me because there's nothing around. Like it's like, yes, these are dinosaurs on my TV, but I was not getting like the weight or power of these animals through that because there was nothing around them. And even like the Triceratops and everything else. And in this last season, I think what helped, or not last, whatever, this episode, the one that we're talking about tonight, I think what helped is that there was more of the different kinds of animals interacting with each other. So even though I don't really know how big one of the pterosaurs is, I understand that it is the big thing. There was a big thing and there's a little thing. And based on that, you can kind of fill in the gaps and fill out the story yourself. I don't know, it just made it more engaging to me. Like, it feels, even though the point is for it to be realistic, by omitting all of the context and detail and science, it just feels like fantasy to me, personally.
I'm not sure I would say that as strongly as Amelia, but
I don't want to, I want to clarify this point. I know that dinosaurs are not around today, and I understand that the visual effects of the show are stunning, but the fact that it's treated like they're real and there's not given any point of reference, it's just hard to conceptualize as a real thing that's actually happening.
Well, right.
I don't literally mean it's fantasy, but
no, of course. And you're getting at a very important point. So many people in the channel may not know this. Some of my friends here may not know this. For a long time in my life, I wanted to do a career in visual effects, and in film in general. I didn't know exactly where in that realm I wanted to be, but I studied a little bit in college. And I really, really thought that I was going to go in that direction. And instead, I went with the other Hail Mary, I want to be a rock star job, and decided to become an academic who studies dinosaurs.
You made a mistake. You're saying that the person you are actually occurred in two people in my family, where
right,
I do dinosaurs and my brother went into film.
Right, exactly.
If you join us together, you'll get your dream again. You have to meld us.
Right. Well, maybe I should have been two people. Maybe I ate a twin. Maybe we were going to both be twins. My Dylan was consumed in the womb.
Kronos eating his twin.
He must have been hungry. He's bigger than me now. So.
Yeah. Anyway, but Amelia's getting at an important point, which is that Alex's webcam defocused again.
No.
Alex is now fantasy.
Yeah.
No.
Alex.
He's in the Vaseline realm.
Yeah, he is. Here, lean back a little bit. Don't put your hand in front of it.
Oh, it's worse.
I think if
we're gonna do a little wiggly.
All right, you play with that. I'll deal with this topic. So the idea in visual effects and in philosophy in general is that we have like what they refer to as schemata for various things in the real world. And that is essentially this nebulous concept of your own expectations for how things behave in the world. Visual effects are most effective when they completely fit the schema that we have for something. And it is difficult to convince somebody that something is real if it doesn't work. A lot of this is unconscious. So like in animated things that don't have shadows bouncing on the world, I'm convinced that a lot of bad CGI looks bad because they have not simulated bounce from a particular light source. So like it looks theoretically fine, but it doesn't look real because it's not actually simulating how the light in the environment would bounce around the thing that's being digitally inserted.
That's why Way of Water looks so good.
It's one of the reasons Way of Water looks so good. We have a really good understanding for what animals are like. But with dinosaurs, you're dealing with the problem of the fact that we don't have a precise schema for what they should be like. I would say, and this might be a controversial opinion, and I take responsibility for it, I would say that in terms of how convinced I am that the thing I'm seeing on screen is real, I would say I'm more convinced by the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park than I am in Prehistoric Planet. I think that, now, that is not to say that the technical accuracy and artistry behind the dinosaurs on Prehistoric Planet is not greater. But in terms of when I'm watching the T-Rex in Jurassic Park attack the cars, I am much more convinced that I'm seeing a real thing. And that is precisely because the animators of Jurassic Park did such a thorough job in trying to capture animal schema for the dinosaurs. This is like...
There's also...
I'm sorry, do you want to say this now?
Well, there's also constant referral in that film and WWD to a physical model and a puppet that does connections in your head brain.
Well, right. That's part of it, is like we actually see things interact with people interact with something in the environment, but like some of the things that they do to actually fit the schema are technically inaccurate or not right. Like the sound of the T-Rex breathing is a humpback whale, like breathing when it gets to the surface. But so would T-Rex have sounded like a humpback whale breathing at the surface? No, but what it's triggering in your mind is large animal, very, very large animal breathing. right? So it's things that you're familiar with that are used in a way to create the illusion that you're seeing a real animal. I actually think that's why people have had such a hard time moving beyond the Jurassic Park designs. I think they were the first time that dinosaurs were visualized in a way in media where psychologically they actually appear to be the real thing.
Yeah.
Like, so I think listen, I study tyrannosaurs right now. When I imagine T-Rex as a living animal in my mind, I don't imagine the T-Rex from Prehistoric Planet. I imagine the Jurassic Park T-Rex. And I think it's like telling somebody who's seen a lion in person, like, actually lions don't look like that. Like, you may understand, like, yeah, okay, but you're like, I saw one. Like,
so now that you said that, I'm thinking about Prehistoric Planet again, and the animals that I find the most convincing, which are the pterosaurs, and I think it's because they hit all those points. Right. What would that sound like? A cursed bird. What sounds do they use? Weird cursed bird sounds. How would it behave? Horribly. How is it behaving? Horribly. How would it walk? Like a bat, but it's not right. Like, that makes sense. And I think that, not that it even makes sense, not that it even is necessarily accurate, but like,
it feels right.
They strike the right balance. It feels right. Yeah. Like, whether or not it is, for those animals, that's something they do really well. Versus with the dinosaurs, like, scale is an issue for me. Like, again, the other part about Jurassic Park that helps is you see the T-Rex next to a Jeep. I know how big a Jeep is. Right. That's helpful. Like, just to get a sense of, because then throughout the rest of the movie, when you see it loose, it's like, oh, right, I remember how big that is because it was next to a Jeep. It was next to a person. Versus, like, for me, with the problem with using these real environments is those are plants that are alive today. I know how big those things are. So, like, in the last season, seeing the T-Rex on the bank with normal trees and the T-Rex looks small compared to the trees, I'm like, what? Whether it is or not, it's just something isn't quite adding up to me, and it pulls me out of it. So that's what I mean when I say, to me, it feels like fantasy. I don't actually mean that it feels made up. It just, I am acutely aware that it is animated, and I do not at all get the response that I hear a lot of people talk about, like, oh, it feels like a document. It doesn't to me, personally.
For me, some of the most effective moments in this episode, and what I mean, like I said, I really like this episode. And I think it bears repeating that we all liked this, and that, like, I think our criticisms come from a place of love and wanting to just kind of, like, I mean, it's not our job to improve this. We don't work for the company that made it, but whatever.
Right, we're not being haters, is I guess what you're trying. Like, we enjoyed this, and our criticisms.
We've been complaining for the last 25 minutes, but we're not.
Right.
Because we're academics. That's what we do.
It's like receiving comments on a manuscript where you're like, this is a good paper, but here are some edits we would make to improve it.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, Don, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So some of the most effective moments for me were the night vision shots on Madagascar. Like, when they play with the camera in that way, and then also I think putting the camera on the ground with the Adalatherium really helps to sell, like, the scale. Like, it helps scale it a lot, because I also get the sense, like, even though I've never seen an Adalatherium, like, and I mean, both in, like, of course I've never seen when they're extinct, but I also have never personally seen the fossil. So, like, I don't know how big it is, but I get the, like, I can see that, and I'm imagining, like, I know how big it is. Like, I can imagine how big this thing is. It's like a possum, or like something around the size of an animal I encounter all the time.
Like a raccoon.
And putting the camera right there on it is great. And then playing with, like, night vision and stuff really sells this to me. It makes it like the illusion of reality is more completed when you see, like, camera techniques that a real documentary would use, like putting on the night vision. I also, I don't love the Antarctic segment, but I really like the like thermal camera part of it. That was cool.
That shit's cool.
Yeah. Dalton, I'm sorry we're laughing, but
we were laughing at you. We were laughing at the cat.
Wait, were we? I
now found it.
I was laughing. No, I'm sorry. I was laughing at the idea that Dalton's, like, regularly encountering raccoons.
Dalton,
yeah, I wander around at night.
I might speak counter to you. In that I agree, we're agreeing, but I think it's for different, or at least for me, it's for different reasons, where I really like the night vision shots and like the kind of thermal imaging shots, but I almost feel it's because there's, like, right, like the issue with a CGI animal, or just like any fictional design, is like it is the uncanny valley, right? And if you're super close, but it's not selling you, you're going to be like, okay, right? Like, you can have Avatar: The Way of Water, where everything's real. You can have something that's very close, but not quite there. But I think as the farther as you abstract away within like a reasonable setting, the brain you're like, okay, like seeing it in black and white, seeing it in thermal images, I'm like, oh, okay. Like it feels more real because they're trying to capture like the
Yeah.
photorealism less, which is bizarre. And
Right. I mean, if you pop a VHS filter over it, it would look
yeah,
perfect.
it would look great.
Right.
Right? Like monsters look and they're not monsters, they're real animals, but like when you make up a monster for a monster movie, like you don't show it all or clearly. It's more effective as an idea. Like even with animals, right? Like the shadow of a tiger at like the edge of a campsite is vastly more intimidating than just seeing one. Like glowing animal eyes, like less is more, and this is a documentary, and obviously that's not the point of a documentary, which is I want to show you stuff. But just in terms of like vibes, and I guess just to quickly build off of what Amelia said, the pterosaurs, yeah, and I agree with Amelia because they work the best for me. I love the pterosaurs. Every time they're on screen, they're real, and I think they benefit a lot from open shots. They're doing stuff in the sky, and it's easy. Like the lighting's much more direct and easy to play with. Like if you need light to hit this thing, you have a lot of different angles, and you have membranous like skin that you can like illuminate faintly. It's like Yoda's ears in the
right.
prequel trilogy, where like his stupid ears look more real than the rest of him because there's like just a little bit of light coming through.
Yeah, you get subsurface scattering is the
term.
Yeah.
And you see his green blood that.
Yeah, and he has green blood vessels. Yeah, and so like the pterosaurs are fantastic. That's what a pterosaur looks like.
There's one other note about the visual effects we could talk about before we said this whole video would take us 30 minutes to record, and we're at 30 minutes and we haven't even started talking about the segments yet.
We always have a lot to say here at the Skeleton Crew.
We sure do. As one commenter,
we like to hear the sound of our own voices.
Yes. One other thing that I think is worth mentioning before we go into it is I think the dinosaurs always look at their best and most realistic when we see them up close. And I think there's probably a technological reason for that, which is that it's not uncommon in visual effects. And huge disclaimer, I was not a part of the visual effects team on the show. I don't know that it was handled this way, but I know that this is generally a principle where you'll have multiple versions of the model like that are at different mesh resolutions with different baked in textures. And I would imagine that for the things that get shown close, there's a close-up, extremely high detail version of the maquette. Mm-hmm. So that they've got their high detail beauty shot thing. I think that this winds up applying very strongly to something like, I don't know, the Masiakasaurus. Like, the Masiakasaurus up close has amazing loving detail. It's gorgeous. You don't see it as much far away, and I don't think it's just that the details are smaller. I think they're using different computational approaches because modeling all of those scales and the fine feathers at that resolution would be really, really difficult. So I think it's why some of the dinosaurs wind up looking better up close. Either it's different models or it's different rendering settings. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's just computers, right? Like it takes a long time to render one frame of this show. So
like video game. It's like a map loading in.
Right, exactly. So it's possible that they're saving on detail when they're far away, and that might be why some of the very large animals especially look a little bit overly smooth and a little bit shiny sometimes. Yeah. I would not be surprised if it's like that.
This is incredibly obvious in Walking with Dinosaurs, where things look good up close, but like abstracted, it looks like you're looking at them through like blurry binoculars. You're like, yeah, that's like the shape of one of those.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, up close in Walking with Dinosaurs too, they're usually puppets.
Models, yeah, they're puppets.
Well, because in Walking with Dinosaurs, it's the reverse. The models were not very good, even relative to the time. I think relative to the budget,
models,
they were good. The CG models were awful. Like, they're
not great.
I mean, and it like no knock on the animators. Like they had a limited budget and limited capabilities. Like,
and it was 1990.
1999.
Right. I mean, like Jurassic Park did better, but that had a major studio behind it. Like this was the BBC. But the models are not great. The CG models, so they look good far away. Yeah. They do not look good up close. And you see that occasionally, unless they're puppet. Now that we have spoken at length about special effects for a long
something we're all very qualified to speak on.
Yes. Let's talk about some of the individual things that we saw.
Yes.
Now, as some of you know, even though not nearly as many of you know this as we had hoped you would, we have another series going now about the science behind Prehistoric Planet, We would like it if you watched all of those videos, because I lost a lot of sleep trying to get that video up in time to coincide with the launch of the new season, and I'm very disappointed in all of you.
Metrics aren't great.
Metrics aren't great.
Get them up.
Pump those numbers
Come on.
up. Those are, wait, you can't even see me doing the Matthew McConaughey chest beat thing. You gotta, those are rookie whatever the fucking line is. I don't care. We're not gonna do an in-depth dive in the science in this episode. We'll cover it when we have time and when we can give it kind of the service that it deserves. But we want to just briefly talk about some things that jump out to us as we watch the episode. So I think the first segment of the show is I'm going to pull it up on my other monitor.
It's the Zalmoxes.
It's the Zalmoxes floating on the raft.
It's the chicken on a raft.
Yeah.
Chicken on a raft. Hey, chicken on a raft. Chicken on a raft on a Monday morning.
We're going to get copyright struck. That's too good. Yeah, so it's a neat little segment. Animals floating on rafts of vegetation after a storm is a thing that happens a lot. It's probably how islands get animal life of like terrestrial animals.
It's how South America got monkeys.
Right.
Among other things.
Floated across the Atlantic Ocean on a raft like this. It's insane, but it's true. So it's a neat thing to see here. I'm continually baffled as to why Zalmoxes always looks like a baby in this show.
Is a baby?
Well, I assumed this was supposed to be another baby individual of it. Like, I've found Zalmoxes' teeth when I've done field work in Romania. Like, they're like that big, like one tooth. This is not a very small animal. So I don't know if I'm really getting a bad sense of scale here, or if it's just a baby. I don't know, but I wish they'd show me a grown-up one if this is a baby. It would be cool.
I just briefly, and this is nothing to do with the science, as our viewers may have gathered, based on the song I just sang and other things I've said in other videos, I like the coasts. I like the place where the sea meets the land. And when that big vegetation raft came by, all I could think was like, that'd be I'd want to hang out on that big raft for like a day or two. It seems like a very cool place.
With the Mosasaur circling around you?
No, the big one that he gets to at the end.
Well, I mean, the Mosasaur is presumably still around.
Yeah.
I was expecting it to be like capsized like an orca trying to get to a seal on an ice floe.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I'll raise a single complaint, which is that if the Mosasaur wanted it, it would have grabbed it. They could definitely burst, and that's probably what they were doing most of the time for hunting, was like burst, ambush, attack.
But the base of that thing looks so thick and like veggie.
No, I meant when he was loose in the water. Like at one point he has to transfer from the lizard to the big rock. I'm saying if the lizard wanted it, he would have taken it. So I was disappointed, of course.
I know.
That's how season 1 opened. Was a lizard wanted a small thing and it grabbed it because they can.
I'm hoping that they show the extinction just so that we can see mosasaurs go extinct, just so that I can hear you complain about it on our next YouTube video.
Can we make a sea shanty about
see them vaporized? Probably.
Oh my god.
A mosasaur sea shanty? That'd be lit.
That's gonna be premium content.
Yeah, that's premium.
Yeah, like sailor, like to do it. Yeah.
Not that any of them are mosasaur focused, but for those of you who may have been paying attention to my shenanigans a couple months ago, I made a mosasaur playlist, which includes many sea shanties and other nautical songs that will be shared at a point in the future.
Writing a mosasaur sea shanty sounds like a wonderful use of all of our time.
The Western Interior.
It's about a crew of pirates that accidentally travel back in time to the Western Interior Seaway. Like they sail through a weird storm and they come out and they're like, there's a sea through the land and we sailed it up and down the coast from Arctic. I don't know, something like that.
No, the cadence is there. I like it.
What if there was like a crew of whalers that got sent back in time, and they just had no idea.
Cretaceous.
They're just like, why don't we see any fucking whales? And then they all die of scurvy.
Well, you see, there ain't no whales, so we tell tales and sing our whaling tune. They're just the whalers on the moon.
That's the right. Like I don't know, the first mosasaur they'll see, they're probably like, oh, it's literally the biblical Leviathan. Oh,
that's a weird way.
Actually, there's a later series SCP that is about like a Western Texan town that gets sent back to the Cretaceous, and it's just like an apocalypse log where it's like, oh, we're being attacked by like Satan and his devils. It's pretty cool.
That sounds cool. We should cover that on the channel, really. But I think next we need to talk about Tethyshadros, which we get a nice segment on. I know that Amelia wants to say something about the bird aspect of this, but
Birds.
Bird. But I think it's worth briefly mentioning, because I'm an Italian and I'm proud of Italian dinosaurs, that Tethyshadros was found in Italy.
All right, there.
James, you're from New York. Like, I get
Yeah,
it. That's
come
your
on.
heritage. But you're
That's
talking
basically
about
Italy.
it as if you grew up there.
I grew up there in my heart. Tethyshadros is known from a couple of really, really exceptionally preserved specimens, and I guess what I'm getting at is it's kind of sad that the Italian fossil record is not able to be more thoroughly sampled, because there's probably a lot of really good stuff awaiting discovery. And
Yeah, they also have like Triassic pterosaurs that are neat.
right,
Yeah.
like a lot of really good stuff. But it's just hard for academics to get permits to dig and work and all of that kind of stuff. It's a shame. But
Invite us, Italy.
please.
2 of us are sort of Italian.
Sort of. A little bit. But Alex, you were doing this with your hands, which I think means that you wanted to talk about that.
I don't really want. I don't know a lot. I just thought it was really cool, and I really liked its keratinous little. It's a just a premaxilla, because they don't have rostrils. Those are just ceratopsians.
They don't have rostrils. Yeah. It's a neat beak. We know that it had that. This is one of those things that, you might want to write off as fantasy or speculation, but we know that the beak looked like that. It's possible that other hadrosaurs had something similar. It's neat.
It's very cool.
Yeah. But all is not well in Mesozoic Italy.
No, the birds.
The birds.
It's the 1930s. Who's that?
No, that was because it was only like 5 minutes into the episode, and I was like, all right, it's doing more of the same. And then the birds descend like hell onto the hadrosaurs, and I was like, this is so. That was good. I was like, okay, I can be into it. Like, it was just great. As we've said many, many times, the pterosaurs are hands down the best part of this whole endeavor, and the way they just appear out of nowhere and immediately stab a child. Like, that's it. It was great. It was just really, I don't know. I loved it. It was great. Had a good energy to it.
Should have played Ride of the Valkyries on their way in.
Should.
It's basically like a bombing sequence.
Right.
It was nuts. Yeah, love it.
Well, I think it's why it's really effective, but it's one of the few segments that they kind of relax the documentary style constraint on. Like the shots from the baby Tethyshadros point of view as the pterosaur's approaching, menacing, really, really effective. And I think it's because they were it's like, yeah, we can't actually get that angle, but we're gonna show it. And I like the effect that it gave.
It would have been cruel, but like if they played with us a little bit more, like they're like, oh look, they all look like they're gonna get away. He runs, but he they miss him, and then they get him like at the last second. That would have been so.
Oh, if they stab him right through the torso or something with the beak, like
yeah, I wish the show had a little more violence.
Yeah,
it's got like kind of it's got violence, but like you don't really feel it usually.
Yes, and actually, thank you for saying that, because I high key, not that this is a season 1 reaction, but that was something watching again that really struck me. Like, again, especially during the Mosasaur fight, I'm like, they're not breaking the skin. What? Like, they're not armored, and they're strong. Like, and that they weren't breaking the skin, and like just the way even the Tyrannosaur tearing into the sea turtle carcass. I'm like, what? It is very, very rated G with as many babies that die. Like, it's very
PG, parental.
simple. It's just clean. It's like, no, like
Could this be?
We've not seen an Azdarchid actually stab a baby yet, even though they definitely did, and that would have been more effective than trying to grab it with tongs.
Like a shred. I think I've seen paleo art, and I don't know who did it, so I can't credit them. But like someone, of like an Azdarchid like impaling little dinosaurs on shit
Like a
like a
kebab.
shrike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No,
Could
but yeah,
this
like
be related to the trend of however people watch? Oh yeah, in American media, kids will watch like a movie where a soldier will massacre a village, but they won't show a boob. But on European TV, you can watch sex, but they won't show someone getting like a paper cut.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand a little bit why it's so bloodless, because there's the curse with anything that's dinosaur related. Like, unless it's intentionally really niche and low budget, there needs to be appeal to kids, or like a sense that you can market it to children without being irresponsible.
but this
Aren't,
is
like they get pretty nasty kills in like documentaries that are like PG, like real life stuff where you watch a zebra get like.
But I think it's different because it's real life, and they also usually they don't show the
Well-
worst of it in nature documentaries for a broad audience.
They'll show you a distended in like spilled intestines, something at least.
Sometimes I've watched wild dog. This is in videos when I was like trying to see, hey, what does it look like when animals predate upon one another? I've watched right, yeah. I've watched just a pack of wild dogs just instantly eviscerate a pregnant impala, and the amount of blood and gore that you see, I was completely unprepared for the first time. They cut pretty judiciously in a lot of stuff. I like, again, and Amelia, this is not to say I don't want to see it, but I kind of don't blame them for making it as bloodless as it is.
I understand, but so the point that I'm remembering now is, so I had a conversation with a colleague that I'm working with, Clint Boyd, on a new critter that we've described together. We commissioned some artwork for it, and in the conversation about the artwork that we've commissioned for it, there was a discussion of, let's say, the style and how it should look, and the amount of blood that should be present, given the events happening in the depiction in the scene that we've decided to depict for this animal. And I can't remember if it was Clint or the artist or who it was, and I'm trying to remember who it was that raised concern about blood. It actually might have been our other co-author, not Clint. And because it was Clint who was like, because they said, well, if it's going to be for kids, like, so he was talking about doing maybe a mural or something that could go up in the museum. And our other co-author was like, well, if it's going to be for kids, like, maybe blood's not a good idea. And Clint's like, this is the problem. Kids love blood. Like, kids love kind of violent nature documentaries. Like, they're really into it because, like, they're not, I don't know. If you're really a nature kid, you're into it. It's cool. It's interesting. It's real. It's actually parents that don't like it.
Well,
Which is, again, dumb. It's important for kids to learn what reality is. But anyways.
I agree. I mean, you're preaching to the choir here. It's just like, I understand on a marketing level why Apple TV wouldn't have been like, don't, like, they might have been like, don't actually show what would happen if a T-Rex bit into an herbivore. Just don't show it.
Get some squibs. Make a nice model.
It would be like a Tarantino movie. It would be like the ending of Django Unchained, but all at once.
Man, I get it's a show, and they probably don't want to do anything particularly disturbing, but like, and this would be practically a bloodless sequence, but in the very good death attack of the 40-foot pterosaur segment, like that little Tethyshadros that one grabs is probably still alive when it gets swallowed whole. And I was just thinking about Nope and the absolutely the most affecting scene in that movie, where everything's being pulled up the like esophagus thing, and just like up close and personal, and like a POV shot of getting swallowed by a monstrous pterosaur would be horrific.
Yeah, there's a lot of horror to mine in the Mesozoic. I've always hoped that there would be some sort of R-rated, like, for adults treatment of this that really leans into how horrible it could have been. But I'm not surprised.
It doesn't have, I don't want to imply that we think less like the show is not good because it's not violent. No. That's not the case. But like,
yeah.
No, exactly. Like this, it makes sense that this is not the version of that. I just hope that media exists at some point. It would be a cool thing to have.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. God, I think I just admitted to like desiring pterosaur vor.
I was gonna say you're broaching on fetish content there, but
I know.
This is becoming a recurring theme with you.
Yeah, you mentioned vor a lot.
Have I?
Yeah, a couple times on the channel now.
And I live with him.
You straight up.
Right. We're
asked...
going to take that information, and we're going to do what every good Italian man does. Push it down. gone.
we're not going to continue that train of thread that thread of thought and jokes that now I've got to retort to that. We're going to continue with it.
We're going to talk about Madagascar now.
Yeah.
Talk about Madagascar.
Tell me about Simosuchus, Alex.
Oh my God, it's so cute and good.
So good.
That's what it looked like. It looked like that. They got, I didn't count, but it looks like they've got every little scale and osteoderm in place. They have all their, appendicular osteoderms on the forelimbs and hindlimbs in the back. He's a little guy. He's got a short little face. There's so much to say about Simosuchus. The skull is so short that it actually rearranges bones of the palate. The vomiers are exposed on the palate, which is something you don't really see in crocs that far up the tree. But what I really want to talk about is that, much like Shia LaBeouf, it's in a hole. Or Sigourney. Well, no, Sigourney Weaver doesn't really. She has people dig the holes. Unimportant. And so this is a fun bit of behavior, and that, maybe if you're not super familiar with Notosuchians or Ziphosuchians, to which Simosuchus belongs, which are this group of kind of Mesozoic to into the Cenozoic crocodilians. They're all over the place, but they're mostly found in the southern hemisphere. And they kind of, in the doc, they're like, some of the dialogue is kind of like, oh yeah, on Madagascar, there's things you would have never see anywhere else in the world. And one of these weird things is Simosuchus, which is weird, but there are a lot of very strange kind of terrestrial crocodiliforms with very diverse diets that are all over, like South America, even parts of Africa, and I think there are a few in Europe. They actually aren't particularly common in Eurasia. But yeah, so well distributed. But we have evidence from these other crocodiliforms, things like Morrosaurus, which is found, I think one of them was even associated with the nest. It's one of the few Mesozoic crocodilian nests we have. And kind of the association of the material, how the skeleton is arranged with the eggs, and kind of the compaction, what the actual preservation looks like, led the people who described this nest, and I feel bad not remembering their names, but they infer this as evidence of a burrow, that this was a burrow nest. And this is something, it's not just in this one paper, it's been reported a few times, and there have even been papers about possible digging adaptations in some Notosuchian forelimbs. It's really cool. It's something that I've seen only in the materials and methods sections of very niche crocodilian papers, and now they're like, wait, look, here's what it would look like. Did Simosuchus protect the entrance of its burrows with a spiky butt? That's very speculative, but I choose to believe it's real because it's very cute and cool and funny, and I like it.
Alex.
I have nothing bad to say about Simosuchus or its betrayal. It was a king. It barked at a big Majungasaurus. It absolutely clowned on it. R.I.P. Bozo. Packwatch. It was great. It's the best. And you know what? I think, I don't have any evidence for this, but I think that no good mammal stealing its burrows. Simosuchus was digging them, and that no good rat is like, oh, I'll just move in here.
It's free real estate.
Alex, before you get corrected online, are the burrowing nest, the Notosuchian with the nest egg?
Is it not Morrosaurus?
Is it Yakararani?
Yes, it is. Is that like a 1998 or 97 paper?
It's like 2009.
It's a 9.
Well, I don't know. The paper on Wikipedia is 2009, but it's not citing the eggs. No, it is 2009. I can't open it for some reason.
Hold on. These might be...
Unless it's too thin. I mean, it very well could have happened twice. But I'm looking out for you.
I appreciate it.
Well, while Alex
I
delves
fact
into
check
literature,
myself.
right? I just want to say that I thought the Madagascar segment was really good, and we've talked about it at length, and I won't repeat everything, but it's gorgeous. The Majungasaurus is neat. It's good to see this weirdo included. Was Majungasaurus the first? Well, no, Carnotaurus was the first Abelosaur. No, well, I guess Abelosaurus was the first Abelosaur. Was Majungasaurus the first well-known one that wasn't Carnotaurus?
I think Majungasaurus was excavated probably before all of them. but misidentified.
Yeah.
Well, oh right. It was Majungasaurus for a while, right? And
Mhm.
it was it was once mistaken to be a pachycephalosaur. Well, because they only found the like ossified hornlets on the nose that they thought were a pachycephalosaur dome. It was recognized later. While not one of the first abelosaurs known to science or correctly identified, it is one of the most scientifically important. Majungasaurus has formed the basis for a tremendous amount of research because the skull is really, really well preserved, but was completely disarticulated. But I think there's also an articulated skull. We were able to do a lot of CT imagery, is I guess the point. So it was one of the first dinosaurs that was like intensively studied with computed tomography. Really, 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 really important.
Because we have a cast of one at the AMNH. Is that the articulated one then?
I
wasn't aware there was more than one. I figured as an abelosaur there was like one stellar specimen, and that was all.
I actually think there's a couple. Let me look this up to confirm because I'm embarrassed that I did not check this before we recorded, but I didn't think I was going to talk about this. So there is the really, really good skull is the disarticulated one that has been like pieced back together because it's almost perfect, right? So you could it's kind of like Jane, the juvenile T-Rex's skull, and that it's like it's not preserved in association, but it is so beautifully preserved that you can put it back together easily. They have also found a series, quoting from Wikipedia here, a series of less complete skulls, as well as dozens of partial skeletons ranging from juveniles to adults.
There's a lot of them. I'm looking at least at one, like, articulated, not 100% complete skull, but actually a pretty decently complete one.
I mean,
that's like the head and the neck.
I think that's the field jacket of the original one. Maybe it was more articulated than I thought, but I know it was prepped into.
Well, you can download, I think, every STL of its skull off of Morrosaurus.
Yeah, you can.
Except for, of course, the Vomer, which wasn't preserved.
Of course it wasn't.
Also, I figured out the Notosuchian thing.
You wouldn't download a Vomer. Alex would.
I would. I would in a heartbeat. Hold on. Let's quickly clarify the Notosuchian thing because I tracked it down.
Yeah.
I was both correct and incorrect. The first, the kind of one of the earliest identifications of possible burrowing adaptations is Gomani in 1997, which is a description of Malawi. Jesus Christ. Masiakasaurus. This is not a nest, but it's a burrow. It also has burrowing adaptations. It's got like evidence of strong neck muscles, deep skull, something with the occipital condyle, stuff like that. And this paper that I actually went for this literally says, however, Simosuchus could have been an adept burrow considering the lack of fossorial traits is not indicative of fossorial capability, based on the fact that several extant crocodilians are burrowers without any specific morphological specializations for this behaviors. So this is kind of like, this is a review paper on a few aspects of Notosuchians. If people are interested, this is paleoecological implications of an upper Cretaceous tetrapod burrow from the Bauru Basin in Brazil. But it's kind of investigating, different possible burrowing reptiles and evidence of burrowing in Notosuchians. And that Notosuchian fossils are known associated with burrows.
Yeah, I mean, burrowing is one of those things that I remember trying to do some research on this, and like, you need to be burrowing a lot for your skeleton to start to show that you burrow. Like,
got to be in the ground 24/7.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of animals with burrowing adaptations, but it's kind of like fast running. Like, being proportioned like a horse is not necessary to move quickly. It's necessary to move quickly as like your habitual style of movement. But a rhino can go almost as fast for a much shorter period of time, right? It's kind of like that. If you dig a little, like humans can scratch dig. Dogs have no burrowing adaptations, but my old dog dug a lot. Craters in the backyard. He was a big dog and he made big holes. And I'm going to stop saying that sentence. So,
my final Simosuchus comment.
Sure.
I like that one of them stands on top of the other one.
Yes.
When they're eating plants. That has big caiman capybara energy.
You mean like the mount in the Creation Museum?
I was going to bring that up. I found that out today.
What?
Uh-huh.
No.
Shall we talk about the importance of Adalatherium briefly before we move on to the much more interesting cameo appearance in that segment? Adalatherium is a weird mammal. It's got a mosaic of traits that are indicative of a lot of different... based on my recollection of the paper, which I didn't have a chance to reread before we recorded this, I will before we do an in-depth deep dive on the segment. It's got adaptations of a lot of that are indicative of a pretty unique lifestyle, and I think it's got skeletal traits that are characteristic of many different mammal groups. Like the paper talks a lot about the weird body plan. Like it's a weird animal. You don't really see it a lot externally, but internally it's weird. I don't know how many mammals have this, but it has an extra ossification in the leg that they call a parafibula. Yeah, like I'm sure that's more widely distributed because they're like, well, it's got a parafibula, and no further explanation is given. But I don't like knowing that. It has epipubic bones like monotremes and mammals. It seems to be a member of a unique south or southern hemisphere group of mammals that they call Gondwanatheres, which are of uncertain phylogenetic position, and therefore we don't really know a lot about them. What we do know about them, Dalton, I don't know if you want to take this, but what do you think of the reproductive mode shown here?
Oh, so I loved it. I was all on board with it. I thought it was a great fake out. It was like, oh, is it going to go eat these eggs? It's like, no, it's her eggs. And like, yes, the early mammals laid eggs. I mean, we still have egg-laying mammals today. We've got monotremes. I thought that was lovely. And then I learned some things that are unfortunate. And I do think that in part it's because the knowledge imparted by these new studies was unavailable when they made the show. They made the show and then these papers came out. But a paper came out that was led by Luke Weaver, who's a really great paleontologist working on early mammals and especially on multituberculates, which are a really ubiquitous group of early Mesozoic or like late Mesozoic mammals. And they get into the Cenozoic too. We just kind of, if they would have survived to present, I think it'd be really lucky and cool, but they didn't. But so there's this group called multituberculates, and they're within what is sometimes called theriforms, but you could also refer to as stem therians. And what that means, for those unaware, is that mammals can broadly be split into two groups: the monotremes, which are the egg-laying mammals, and the therians, which give live birth. And therians have within them marsupials and placentals. And so we're placental mammals. We give birth to big babies, and marsupials give birth to small, underdeveloped babies that then do most of their development in the pouch. Multituberculates are outside of marsupials and placentals, but inside of monotremes. So it wasn't clear for a long time if they laid eggs like monotremes, or if they had marsupial-like reproduction or therian-like or placental-like reproduction. And looking at their histology, Luke Weaver and the colleagues, they found that the histological characteristics of multituberculate bones show a development that's very, very similar to placental mammals. And so it's very likely that the placental style of giving birth to kind of big, well-developed young is the ancestral therian condition that they inherited from something that was more like a multituberculate. That means a couple of things. One, it means that the marsupial mode of reproduction probably isn't the kind of ancestral mammalian thing, and that marsupials have independently acquired this weird pouch-based development cycle. And the other thing it means is that if Gondwanatheres are the sister group of multituberculates, which a lot of analyses do find, that it's very likely that Gondwanatheres, like Adalatherium, would have given live birth like a placental mammal. But you can't really fault the show for this at all, because that research came out almost certainly long after this whole segment had been produced. And also, given the fact that there is still uncertainty in where Gondwanatheres go on the tree, if it shakes out that they're not sister to multituberculates and they're lower down the mammal tree, then this will hold up that they laid eggs. But it's just something to consider.
I want to interject.
I just realized. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So, for any of you who are aspiring paleontologists who think that phylogenetics is boring, I hope that this discussion from Dalton illustrates the profound importance of knowing the phylogenetic relationships of organisms as a first pass to understanding anything about their paleobiology. you can't do a lot of functional and life history stuff in the fossil record without a firm phylogenetic context. Like, we often talk about these things, and I know it sounds like we're getting very into the weeds about what something is, what it isn't, where it goes on the tree, but it's how we understand everything. I think that's an important point that's lost on a lot of people. I did not understand it until I was in the field.
Mm-hmm. I would build on that and continue, and this is kind of our plug for our own stuff because we're shameless. But I'd posit that, not even that this is done intentionally or with some kind of disrespect, but I feel that not a lot of the time, but sometimes research is done in paleo, especially in kind of the dinosaur vibes, dino world, that's really focused on kind of these questions, ecology, interesting stuff, behavior, stuff like that. But it is, again, like Jimbo said, really dependent on the phylogeny, and there's sometimes an attitude within some researchers who maybe don't work on phylogenetics, that's like, okay, with more of this, we kind of, the broad strokes are figured out. Now we can work on the interesting questions, which is something I've heard a few times. Right? Oh, we've worked out the taxonomy, the phylogenetics, the anatomy. Now we can focus on interesting questions, which I think misses the point, and that these are really important things to understand. They're the most important thing to understand. They're the bedrock of the field, and everything else. Those other interesting questions about ecology and behavior and patterns of how features evolved are that you have to investigate them in a phylogenetic context most of the time, which is less stable than most people think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it changes all the
time. We're working on fixing it. It's also, it's one thing that is, I think, kind of worth noting is that I think in the last 10 years, there's been a slowdown of the production of like novel phylogenetic studies. There's a lot of like, well, we use this person's matrix. I'm not aware of any new matrices that have really come out, aside from the very, very notorious Barron et al. Matrix for early dinosaur evolution.
I published a new crocodile morph matrix.
Oh, right. No, you did. I'm sorry. You did. No, you're right. I forgot that was I forgot that was de novo. I thought that was like an expansion of an existing one. That was like,
well, I mean, it's a Frankenstein.
Right, but it's a new analysis. I mean, it counts.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a bunch of different analyses. We edited all the characters. We changed states. We even made some new characters some of which I looked at recently. I'm like, I don't know if these are good.
But no. I mean, that's a good point. Like, yours is one of the very few. There's a lot, like, I'd say since about 2012, 2014, there's been kind of this dearth of people doing, like, renewed investigations into groups. Whereas it feels like in the 90s to the 2000s, almost everybody's PhD was, like, their own matrix and analysis based on first-hand observation. And I think it's kind of related to the tendency that you're saying, like, we understand this now so we can go further. Where I would say, like, we found a lot of new fossils in that time. I don't think we can just assume that we already have all of the relevant character information.
Yeah, so like Sterling's 2011 masterpiece, where he's like, here's how Archosaur phylogeny works. And everyone was like, oh, okay, now we know how it works. And Sterling's work is good and based and great, but like there's stuff we can keep doing. Like he's very clear in that manuscript. He's like, here's what we know, here are good characters, and he's got tons of trees in the back half of that. It's like, there are these topologies that are inconsistent. We need to figure more stuff out. It's fantastic. Like that kind of work is really, I think, quite inspiring. And there have been other theropod matrices, like there's Twig, but there are other people who have kind of taken their own stab at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It's good that people take their own stabs at these things.
Right. There shouldn't only be one. Everybody should really be constantly updating data sets and making their own. And
when you run an analysis, you should run a lot of different versions of it. It's like,
this feels like a subtweet, Alex.
It's not. No, it's not a subtweet. It's just, it's my philosophy of like, run a few. Run it a few times.
Right.
Yeah. The more like sources of data and the more sources of analyses we have, like it produces more uncertainty, which some people aren't a fan of. Like, I mean, everyone wants to know what everything's related to. Well, maybe not everyone. I do. But where there's uncertainty, there is also consilience. And so while some things are going to bounce around in different analyses, and you're like, I'm not sure what this is, a lot of the things are going to be like, oh, we get this consistently every single time, no matter what we do. And that is just further confidence that, oh, we're probably actually picking up something real here.
Right. And sometimes like differences between your trees can be like interesting and kind of informative, right? Like if parsimony, if you're doing a parsimony analysis, right, and you're down weighting the impact that convergence has, that's interesting. Are these like are groups being pulled together because they're convergently similar? Or they, when you change the out group, how does that change like character polarization? Like the idea of using fossils in phylogenetics is to polarize primitive character states. So as you change your out groups, how is that changing that polarization? That's interesting. Like that's an important question. I don't want to get stun locked on why I think extensive phylogenetic method sections are cool and based.
Yeah. For our viewers, do you want to see more videos about phylogenetics? Please say yes. Them. Please, God.
We may make them.
Care about it a lot.
Yeah. If you say no, we will inflict them upon you anyway. You can unsubscribe if you don't want to see them.
James, you're gonna
don't
just
unsubscribe.
Ignore them.
Actually,
just if you see something you don't like, just ignore it.
Right.
Well, no, like it, and then you don't have to watch it.
Yes.
I'll admit this only once, but I was editing I think a Mr. Bayes script that was sent to me by one of my co-authors today for a phylogenetic analysis, and I was doing all the like first appearance dates and LADs, and I just kind of this quiet thing came over my brain. I'm like, this is probably as good as parsimony or better.
All right. No, anyway, no more about systematics. Don't tell us about the snake.
Sure.
Which I'm sure will involve discussion of systematics.
Yeah, their systematics is really good, right?
Yeah, their systematics
we know where they
great. Everyone knows that if any group alive has a really well resolved, really well, so everyone agrees on their phylogenetics. It's squamates and especially snakes, and snake evolution is a settled matter and definitely not the topic of two different books by two different sets of authors with two very different ideas of what's going on.
That came out recently, right?
Yes. Yeah. I have my own ideas, and I have a camp that I support more than the other, I'll say, but I won't really go into that for the sake of preserving my career. But there's a segment in this episode that's really, really cool, and it's where and it's kind of it's foreshadowed because you see some scales moving, and if you're savvy and if you've seen a lot of nature documentaries, you probably recognize them as the snake scales. But the Masiakasaurus is terrorizing the little baby Adalatheriums, and the hunter becomes the hunted, and you think, oh, maybe Majungasaurus is going to come in here and snack this thing up, and it's not. It's a big old snake called Madtsoia, and it's really cool. You very rarely see squamate representation in prehistoric media. Even more rare is to see squamates that aren't mosasaurs. And Amelia, I know you love your mosasaurs, and I love them too, but there's a lot of other squamates in the Mesozoic, and they almost are never featured. I remember there being a snake in Walking with Dinosaurs, and now there's a snake in Prehistoric Planet. So Madtsoia is a big snake. We know this because its vertebrae are big, and snakes are unsurprisingly mostly vertebrae. If you think about an animal that's a long tube, most of that tube is backbone. So there's a lot of opportunities for these things to get fossilized. And so they find these in Madagascar, but they're also found in a lot of other places. So the genus Madtsoia has been assigned also to India and other places in Africa, as well as in South America. And there are Madtsoiid snakes that are found in Australia as well. So they seem to be a pretty Gondwanan distribution of snakes. I can't think of any Laurasian Madtsoiids. And they are almost all of them pretty decently sized. Like, it's hard to extrapolate with a great degree of certainty how big a snake is from isolated vertebrae. But you can get the vibes at least, because like a corn snake is going to have much smaller vertebrae than like a python or an anaconda. And all of these things seem to be in the big constrictor, like python size class. So estimates range from like 16 to like 30 feet for some of these snakes. So they're big. And there's a big one in Madagascar. And I was very excited to see it. And for the most part, I have more accolades than complaints, because it's so great to see a squamate represented in a show. I have a few minor quibbles that I do want to discuss. And also, to preface a point, that it's been discussed in the literature before, and as well as in a published abstract for a conference that's coming up. So I feel okay to talk about it because you can find it online. That there are people who are making the point that all these Madtsoids, which range from the Cretaceous up into like the late Cenozoic, because the ones in Australia are like Miocene and Pleistocene.
Wow. Whoa, really?
Yeah, like Yerlinger and Monambi are pretty young, unless there's been revisions of those age estimates. But to
Well,
my
no,
knowledge,
I have no idea.
yeah. So it's a big clade, and it stretches a long period of time. And a lot of stuff is just kind of assigned to the genus Madtsoia, which is what they present here in the show. And that's almost all based on characters in the vertebrae. So it's all based on data just from the vertebrae, because most of what we find of these things are vertebrae, and skulls are very, very rare. We have good skull material from the Australian ones, which are Wonambi and Yerlinger, and we have good skull material from Sanaja, which is South American.
I thought Sanaja was Indian.
You would think so, but it is not. I'm going to double check that to make sure. No, it's India. Okay, you're right. My mistake. I was thinking of
We got your back here at the Skeleton Crew.
yeah, edit that. You're right. I was thinking of Najash, which is
It's all right.
South
The only
America.
reason I know that is I requested CT data
Yes.
for both of those today.
yeah. So there's Najash, which also has skull material, and Sanaja, which has skull material, which are Cretaceous, and they're from India and South America. But we find all these things, and most of them are just vertebrae. And there is discussion in the literature of how useful those characters are, and how convergent they can be in different snakes, and also how variable they can be across the vertical column. So if you imagine if you found a vertebrae from like the front of a snake and compared it to a vertebra from the back of a snake, you know, how similar are these, and how much do they maintain their identity throughout the vertical column? And it's looking like, and I'm kind of falling on the side of it's maybe not the most reliable. It's hard to say, you know, and research will definitely be ongoing with this. But it's possible that the whole group of Madtsoiid snakes isn't really a monophyletic group. And it's just going to take us finding more skull material to really put these things on the tree. But regardless of kind of if Madtsoids as a whole are real, the interesting thing about them is even if they are an entire clade, they are kind of outside of the group that is a lot of modern snake diversity. So there's a group that is kind of provisionally named Afrophidia. And Afrophidia has within it most of the snakes that people think of. So it's got like pythons, boas, it's got the colubrids, which are things, which is the main kind of huge burst of snake diversity are colubrids. It also has vipers and elapids, so cobras. So most snakes are part of this Afrophidia group. And Madtsoids, regardless of how you construct the group, if you include the Australian ones, if you exclude them, all of them come out before Afrophidia, which is noteworthy only because of the behavior that they show the snake doing in the show. So they show Madtsoia and it's a big snake, and they're like, oh, it's like a python, and it constricts the Masiakasaurus. And while I think it's possible that constriction independently evolved in Madtsoia, from what we know, constriction behavior really only appears in Afrophidian snakes. If you map the distribution of constriction behavior on a snake tree, and it's kind of independent of how you construct the tree, because changing all these branches as snake phylogeny is wont to do, you still get the big structure where constriction behavior is appearing after the evolution of Madtsoids. So it's a behavior that I don't necessarily think that Madtsoia was doing. It, again, could be totally convergent. But also, to the show's credit, the show didn't just make it up. In the description of the Madagascan Madtsoia, the paper says, hey, this is a big snake. It's probably eating big prey, and it needs a method to dispatch them, and we think it might be constricting. And the paper, to its credit, also says this is highly speculative, so don't take it too seriously. And so I don't blame the show for putting it in there, and I don't blame the paper for discussing that. But I think it has now become a bit of like an abstraction of an abstraction that lacks robust support, but isn't an impossibility that this thing was constricting. Another noteworthy thing about Madtsoiids is if you look at the skull, even the skulls of like the more derived ones, if the Australian ones are part of this clade, and if you look at the skulls of the Cretaceous ones like Sanaja and why can I not think of the other one's name? Najash. Yeah.
Is Najash a Madtsoiid though?
Well, it depends. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Okay.
It's part of this thing where it like the inclusion of these things can break up or
Gotcha.
or support Madtsoiids. Sanaja is more commonly supported in Madtsoiidae, but sometimes it'll get broken up. But the skull of these Cretaceous snakes is shockingly lizard-like. It lacks a lot of the specializations that snakes have for consuming really big prey items. So it's called like macrostomy, or like big mouth, right? And so we're all familiar with the idea of like a python eating a deer and it kind of walking the deer into its mouth with its specialized, highly mobile skull. And looking at the skull of Sanaja and Wonambi and Yerlinger, we see that they have probably some mobility at the front of the snout, less so than modern snakes, but they lack a lot of mobility further back in the head. And instead, it seems to be kind of the way that snakes acquired their kinetic skull is they developed advanced jaw kinesis first, and then kind of developed advanced skull kinesis from the front to the back. And so Madtsoia may have been more limited in the size of prey that it could take than something like a python. And my big kind of complaint about the Madtsoia in the show, which I am again very happy to see, is that it is probably too much like a python. They've portrayed it very much like a python, even down to like its coloration. And I think it would have behooved them to kind of distance it from modern snakes a bit more, because it is a very different kind of animal than a python, even if it is a big snake.
Have these been hypothesized to be like swimming aquatic predators or like burrowing predators or something?
I think they may have been hypothesized to be burrowers. I don't know for sure.
A lot of burrows in Madagascar.
I think at times they've been grouped with the Simoleophids, which are marine snakes. But that grouping hasn't held. I also should correct myself. I don't actually think that Najash has been a Madtsoiid. I think I read something incorrectly. But Sanaja has variably been inside or outside the group.
Okay, Antarctica, it's cold.
Yeah, so here two things about Antarctica. One, we know the paleo environment wasn't incredibly cold, but they show it in the winter, and that's okay. Two, they show two dinosaurs here that we know nothing about. And
collectively
a handful of bones. Well, actually, there's a lot of remains attributed to Imperobator, and I'm aware that there is an ongoing reevaluation of the animal. So there might be more than I think, but the holotype of Imperobator is like a couple of foot bones. We don't know a lot about it. We think it's a relative of birds and troodontids and dromaeosaurs. We don't know where within that group it goes. It could be a member of its own part of that radiation. It seems to be pretty big. It's cool. I am torn because it's cool to see a little known dinosaur in the documentary, but it's so poorly known that I kind of just wish they'd put this energy into dinosaurs we know something about, because I don't know. There's a lot of, we have to fully realize it, and we know so little about Imperobator, it's almost impossible to even contextualize it. I don't know. But overall, though, that aside, beautiful segment, really, really cool set piece. And while it doesn't really fit tonally with the rest of the episode as much as we said, it's a great little thing.
It does, and they say it's very briefly, but I do appreciate it. And then it's like, hey, like most dinosaurs, it's warm-blooded. And then you get the nice thermal. I also really like the Morrosaurus. And you guys were totally wrong in our last reaction video, because we watched the trailer and I asked, do you think he's going to get away? And you're like, no, he's not going to get away. He got away. He escaped.
He did.
And that's an animal known from like collectively 75% of a leg. But it's a Thessalosaur, and I liked him. I thought he was cute.
Yeah.
Had nice integument.
No, I like the Morrosaur a lot better. It's just, I don't know, my frustration sometimes is that there's a really good fossil record from this time in Earth's history from North America and Asia, and growing from South America and Madagascar and Africa. There's a lot of things we know a lot about. We could focus on them more. When it's something you know so poorly, where it's like it's not even like it's a poorly understood dromaeosaur. It's not like it's Shridevi relative to Velociraptor, where like there's one specimen of Shri, and it's not that complete. It's beautifully preserved, but it doesn't have the head or anything.
Right.
But we can fill it in based on what we know is its closest relative, based on what's preserved. Like Imperobator is so poorly understood. It jumps around.
Right. It could be a Majungasaurus type situation where in like 30 years we're like, oh, this is a very weird hadrosaur. I mean, not really, but
right. No, it could be a lot of things, is what I'm saying.
Could be a noasaur.
Right. Could be almost.
Which are weird and do a lot of things Coelurosaurs do.
So that's Imperobator.
If we had time, Masiakasaurus.
Yeah.
Noasaur. Weird. Cool group.
But then I think the thing that we need to finish the video on, and by finish the video I mean we need to finish this video. Hatzegopteryx mating. It's a cool scene.
Yeah, I liked when the fight. The fight was very good. It was very brief, but also like I don't know. There was some beak clacking.
A lot of honk.
Great. A lot of honking. Yeah, no, that was like I said, it felt like it brought the episode full circle to like the bird violence that we started with. Like we're back to bird violence. The different kind of bird violence.
I don't know a lot about like bird social behavior. I know in mammals, like a lot of the like male on male competition is ritualized to like avoid seriously wounding each other. But I like that in this segment, the Chad Azdarchid, because I don't embarrass myself mispronouncing the actual name because I know I will. The big Chad just immediately runs in there and he's like, "I'm going to kill you." I don't know. Is that something like in birds? Is there like ritualized combat like in mammals, or is it just like these are mean streets, man?
So
I'm not aware. I mean, you can correct me, but I'm not immediately aware of rituals and like ritual combat in birds.
No, there's not. And I mean, I think that the term ritual combat has a lot loaded onto it. Like mammals often kill each other doing it. Like it's not designed to kill. It is not a fight to the death, but it is often like. It's not like the weird type of dueling that wealthy Germans in like 1880s Prussia did, where they would like whirl their swords around because they were trying to not actually hurt each other. They were trying to acquire one cool scar in their cheek to mark you as a member of the aristocracy. This is a real thing, by the way. German academic dueling, it was ludicrous. You would wear like eye protection so you didn't get your eyes gouged out, and you just whip your swords around without any technique because you didn't actually want to learn how to fight with the sword. You wanted to get the one cool scar in your cheek here that showed that you had been a dueler in school. It's so stupid. There was a whole period where the German aristocracy, all the guys just had the one scar, and sometimes they would just cut it in with a razor if they didn't want to have the sword fight. It's not that.
I love that the American version of this was just stand 8 feet apart and fire guns.
Right. This is a much cooler way to do it. So you do the whirling with the swords. What I'm getting at is mammals hurt each other a lot. So birds have a very different reproductive style than most mammals do, in which it's entirely female choice dominated. So it is generally males display and sing and dance or some combination of those things to attract female attention. I'm not aware of many situations in which that kind of ritual is interrupted by another male and the males fight. I'm sure it has happened. It might happen in some lekking birds where so like some birds do a lekking behavior where they will all gather in one area to do these displays. So not all birds do it, but like prairie chickens do this. I think a lot of shorebirds kind of have the same idea. Turkeys do it, right?
We're forgetting. I'm sorry.
And maybe tyrannosaurs.
We're forgetting a specific kind of bird fight.
A cockfight?
Yeah. Do they? What is that? What do they normally fight for when they're not?
That's for gambling.
I think that's forced by people usually, right? I mean. So
where is it coming from? Like they wouldn't fight if it wasn't a natural
territorial behavior. I think roosters have a little bit of that like old mammal style, like they kind of control a group of females. Yeah, like it's a territorial and defensive thing. I don't know quite what prompts it, but like wild chickens don't do it as far as I know, or maybe only like red junglefowl, which is the ancestor of modern chickens.
Jealous.
I don't know. Anyway,
Anyway.
I'm not aware of a lot of combat that's involved. I'm sure it does occur. I'm not going to say it's wrong or something, but it doesn't. It's not usually a part of it, from what I know. Birds generally are like, they sing and they dance and they show their feathers, and then if the female's not impressed, she flies away. This is actually what's been implicated in this, is that, and it's wrong because there's some papers on it in Dinosaurs that seem to indicate that dinosaurs did something similar. The idea was that because female birds can fly away if they're not interested, it completely changed the way that birds did their reproduction. And that, like, with mammals that can't, the males that are larger and stronger can corral the females and prevent them from leaving to find a male with flashier horns. It's one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. I mean, like, to some degree, I guess you can see where they're coming from. The idea that if you can move freely in all directions, you can't be hemmed in. But as with most things avian, it looks like it's got a deeper history among dinosaurs. Okay, guys. That's it for Prehistoric Planet. I can't always remember in my head if this is Prehistoric Park or Prehistoric Planet or Prehistoric Kingdom.
I do it too.
This is Prehistoric Planet, and this is episode 1 of season 2. We're excited to...
We liked it. It was good.
We liked it. It was good. All of our comments are from a place of wanting it to see it as the best it possibly can be. But we're really happy that something of this level of artistry and scientific and scientifically backed documentary in general, we're happy something like this exists. And we're looking forward to covering the rest of the season as it releases. So remember to like this video if you liked this video. And remember to subscribe to our channel so that for the rest of this week, you get notified as soon as our thoughts on the most recent episode of Prehistoric Planet are out. As always, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. We really appreciate you. We're growing much faster than we ever thought was going to be possible, and we owe all of that to you guys. So thank you very much. See you next time.